Back on Get Up, of course, the huge news from the weekend. 29-year-old Colts quarterback Andrew Luck suddenly retiring from the NFL, which means Jacoby Brissett takes over as the starter. He was 4-11 as the starter in 2017 when Luck missed the entire season with a shoulder injury. But that was a very different Colts team than the one they will put on the field this year. And I want to show you what Louis Riddick had to say about Brissett back in 2017. He tweeted, "The more I watch Jacoby Brissett, the more I think the Colts are lucky as bleep that the Patriots traded him to them. He will be a star." And then with the news this weekend, Louis retweeted his old tweet, adding, "So it begins." Let's get closer into that as Louis Riddick jumps in with us for a moment here. Louis, everyone seems to be just sort of giving up on the Colts now that they are without Andrew Luck. What do you think they can be with Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback?
Look, I still think without a doubt they can be a playoff football team because, number one, he's playing behind one of, if not the best offensive line in football that they have seriously invested a lot of capital into improving. Look, you've got 3 first-rounders and a second-rounder on that offensive line of the starting 5. All right, that's pretty darn good. Costanzo's a good player. We all know how good Quentin Nelson is. Ryan Kelly's a very good player. Braden Smith, the right tackle, very good player. So Jacoby's coming into a situation now where, one, he has the benefit of one of the things that Andrew Luck really didn't have until last year. He has the benefit of protection. Number 2, he's familiar with a system now, whereas in 2017 he was coming into a system and trying to learn it on the fly but with no protection. Really one, credible weapon on the outside in T.Y. Hilton. How do you expect a young kid like that who just got traded from the New England Patriots to perform in that kind of situation? So when people start crushing him for that 2017 season and making sweeping generalizations about how he's going to be as a pro, that's just not being very smart about it. He wasn't set up for success then. They will tell you he wasn't set up for success then. He is set up for it now because he's got protection. He's got good weapons. With the addition now of Paris Campbell, the second-round pick from Ohio State, he's got more guys on the outside that can stretch the field vertically. That's one of Jacoby's strengths. Highly intelligent, highly motivated, very diligent in terms of how he approaches his work. Good mobility in the pocket. A howitzer for an arm. He can put it wherever he needs to. High degree of football intellect. I mean, what's not to like about him? When we talk about quarterbacks, it's funny how when people have preconceived notions about a guy, a lot of times it doesn't take into context. It doesn't take into account the context with which they are forming their opinions. You can't look at 2017 when he was with Indianapolis with that roster and say that's what he is. This team, there's a reason why teams calling the Indianapolis Colts poking around Jacoby Brissett. There's a reason why Chris Ballard wouldn't let him go, because they like him, and they know that the number 2 quarterback position is a top 30 position on the football team, and it's playing itself out now. He's going to have a monster year. I thought this when I saw him play back in 2017. He just needs the right situation. Now he's got it. So as I said, now it begins.
Listen, if Louis Riddick is saying it, I am buying it. Louis, thank you very much here, and we'll see you as the week goes on. There's a sad irony in the fact that this offensive line in front of now Brissett is so good, and that's exactly what probably caused Andrew Luck to retire as young as he did. Now, there are a lot of implications to the Luck retirement, and one of them, of course, is on fantasy owners. Dan Graziano, you were just telling me you had a fantasy draft on Saturday, and this news breaks in the middle of it. Since entering the league in 2012, Andrew Luck averaged the 3rd most fantasy points per game among quarterbacks, behind only Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. So I want to bring Phil Yates into the conversation to talk about that, because the fantasy implications of this are obviously enormous. Field, so good morning. What do you tell all the people who are unfortunately like Graziano's in Graziano's draft, who took Andrew Luck and then find out perhaps even minutes later that Luck isn't going to play this year?
Yeah, the good news is for Dan that A, he is not alone, Greeny, and B, that there are a lot of quality quarterbacks this year. If you were to go through my rankings right now, there are somewhere between 20 and 22 quarterbacks that I could talk myself into beginning the season with. And you go to players who are not even being drafted right now or at the bottom of rounds. Guys like Kirk Cousins, who has excellent 2 wide receivers in Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. Jared Goff is being lightly drafted. They might have the best wide receivers in all of football in Los Angeles. Both of those players, Cousins quietly had a pretty solid year from fantasy purposes last season, even if the season was disappointing for Minnesota. Even Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, guys that we have seen who have been there, done that, are being lightly drafted. Quarterback is the deepest position in fantasy, so while the Andrew Luck news was stunning and his upside was immense when healthy, there are plenty of other contingency plans right now to help solidify your quarterback spot.
All right, there's one other I want to ask you about, and that was the other big story over the weekend, and that was the Texans lose Lamar Miller to a torn left ACL during their preseason game against the Cowboys, another devastating injury in the preseason. We will remind you, Houston traded for Duke Johnson earlier in the month. They were hoping to feature both of them in their offense this year. So let me go back to you on this, Field, on the impact on fantasy owners of Lamar Miller going out for the season.
Yeah, for now, Greeny, this could change with a snap of fingers. Maybe one Adam Schefter tweet of the Texans acquiring a new running back. But for now, Duke Johnson is primed for a massive workload. And Duke Johnson has not necessarily ever been a workhorse in his own backfield. But when he has gotten the chances, he has produced. He actually leads all running backs in terms of receiving yards since he came into the league 4 years ago. He's third in total receptions. And as our friend Hembo has pointed out, over the past 3 years, he leads all running backs in terms of yards per touch. So when Duke Johnson gets his opportunities, he certainly makes good on them. That trade between Houston and Cleveland was, at the time, you noted, to sort of supplement Lamar Miller. But for right now, Duke Johnson feels like the guy in Houston, although I would not be surprised at some point this week if they add another running back.
All right, Field, outstanding. Thank you very much. See you soon. Let me go very quickly to Graziano on that, because if there's a possibility, he just mentioned, any minute now they could make a trade. Melvin Gordon is the name that would jump immediately to mind. How do you see Houston doing that?
That's the big one, but I think it's unlikely. I mean, they already traded what will eventually be a third-round pick for Duke Johnson, so draft capital at a premium there. More likely, you look at guys that might get cut from their teams, like Philly's got a lot of running backs. As somebody like Corey Clement become available, or if Devin Singletary really impresses in Buffalo, do they make one of their veterans available, like a LaShawn McCoy or a Frank Gore? So as the week goes along and rosters thin out, watch for them to look at running backs there.
And again, Melvin Gordon is still just sitting and waiting, and we'll see if he's on the field for anyone come week 1 of the season. Meanwhile, there were players on the field last night. Let me show you some highlights of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, because we got to see, Bobby, Ben Roethlisberger, his only action of the preseason, and for the limited time he was in there, he looked pretty good. This is James Conner running the ball.
Ben Roethlisberger was really fantastic last night, on brand. James Conner was able to get it done early, but as you look at him being able to move the football around, he did a great job spreading it, throwing underneath crossers, being highly accurate, getting it to James Washington, getting it to Juju, did everything you needed him to see.
That was Juju, and this one will be again. This is Roethlisberger on a strike to Juju Smith-Schuster for a touchdown. Big Ben was 8 of 13, 68 yards, and that score. Juju had 4 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown. Steelers beat the Titans in this game 18-6. Titans quarterback situation, which we'll talk about later, is a mess, bordering on being a disaster at this point with the May Mariota played. But generally speaking, I know you got to watch a little bit of this. What did you see from the Steelers offense last night?
I loved it because they were trying to replace AB. So what the problem is, Juju Smith-Schuster, he can slide in there. He can take over the number 1. The question was, who takes over that number 2 position? Who is going to be him? And they drafted James Washington out of Okie State a year ago in the 2nd round. And what the Steelers have done is done a terrific job over the last decade of taking these guys in the 2nd through 6th round and being able to develop them, whether it's Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders, even Martavis Bryant, and turning them into household names. And now I think James Washington, he may not be that every down guy, but he's the over-the-top guy. When you're taking shots down the field, his speed, his elusiveness, that's going to be able to help free up Juju. So I don't think they're going to really miss too much there when you look at the Steelers offense.
I was at their camp a couple of weeks ago. I talked to James Washington, and he said he feels so much better this year because he can play so many of the different receiver positions, whereas last year they limited him. So obviously, as you say, Pittsburgh has a template for how to develop their wide receivers. They did bring in Dante Moncrief, who's having a very good camp, and they like him a lot as a potential number 2. But options, Washington, Deontay Johnson, who they drafted this year, they definitely feel like they have a lot of quality depth and upside at that position.
And look, it was a weird weekend, a terrible weekend, candidly, in the AFC. Houston losing their running back, Indianapolis losing their quarterback, changing what the whole feel of it. And so if Pittsburgh and Cleveland and maybe Baltimore are all thought to be good, this was a good weekend to be a potential wild card team in the AFC.
It really was. And the one thing that we really haven't talked about with the Steelers, because it's kind of been their Achilles heel the last few years, is the defense. They were able to get after the quarterbacks last night for Tennessee. They've done a good job revamping their defensive line. The older players are playing well. They've drafted well. They've got guys in contract years. They brought in Devin Bush from Michigan. So I'm really excited not only to watch the Steelers offense, but to see the old Blitzburg mentality of guys getting after the quarterback up front, pushing the pocket. Cam Hayward right there doing a great job of veteran presence. And so this just won't be a one-dimensional football team in 2019.
We have a lot more football coming your way as we continue, but I did want to show you something in case you missed it over the weekend that happened to Team USA taking on Canada in a FIBA exhibition. Oh, excuse me, this is tonight. That's my fault. This was not the game that they lost the other day. Closing seconds of the first quarter. This is Kemba Walker taking it the length plus the foul. He had 15 points and Team USA up 11 after one. Final seconds of the second quarter now. It's Marcus Smart playing defense and turning it into offense. It's Chris Middleton is going to throw this thing up, and Donovan Mitchell is going to throw it down. The alley, the oop, and the Americans are looking good. Donovan Mitchell had 12 points in the half. Team USA was up by 15 in their final exhibition, again, after a stunning loss over the weekend. Third quarter, USA up 13. They're pulling away. It's Jaylen Brown again. This time, Jason Tatum. He would score 19, and Team USA would win it 84-68. So their matchup against Canada, the last real tune-up before the real deal begins. Greg Popovich and company kicking off the group stage against the Czech Republic on September 1st, then Turkey, then Japan. All three games will tip off 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And we will have Jalen's reaction. He's on the road for his charity golf event.
Oh, my goodness.
That's not live pictures of it. Jalen will join us live with his thoughts on Team USA as they get set for tournament play. So we have that still to come and much more on Andrew Luck, who was booed Saturday as he left the field in Indianapolis. More reaction to that and to the Colts' future as we continue. You're watching Get Up on ESPN.